Hello and welcome to everyone listening in on today's interview with Joseph McCool, a thought leader in the talent management space for over 30 years. My name is R.D. Whitney and I'm the CEO of 365 Media. I'm excited today to talk about this whole concept of the virtualization skill set. These virtualization skills that have become so important to organizations because of the pandemic, but have proven themselves to become invaluable now as part of our future. So I'd like to welcome you, Joe. Welcome to today's event. Thank you for participating.
Yeah, thanks, RD. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Could you start out by just giving a little bit of your background as it pertains to talent management?
Yeah, sure. I've been an advisor to companies across industries now hard to believe, a little over 30 years. I've written and researched the talent management function. I've been a Business Week columnist. I have 3 books to my credit, continue to look very closely at the evolution of the talent management function in particular, and its interface with human resources and other key management functions in the organization.
Excellent, great. And I understand you've had specifically a lot of experience in talent acquisition and helping organizations find, acquire, and attract and retain talent. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Retained executive search has been my critical focus, during that time, understanding why organizations don't get more consistency in terms of hiring at the executive level. I've written about in my first book, Deciding Who Leads, the lack of diversity in executive recruitment and how the lack of diversity in the executive search business contributes to that. So, really interested in key leadership decisions about who's going to step in and take the helm of very important roles, very visible roles. And frankly, executive roles across organizations are the most consequential. They're the most defining in terms of the organization's culture and whether the leaders of that organization are actually living the culture, showing others in the organization that they can and should be inspired by the vision or not. I think executive search, frankly, is a key linchpin to organizational performance, and that's why I've dedicated most of my career to it.
Fantastic. We're going to have a great discussion today. So Trailhead Talent Partners recently released this job description for the Chief Virtualization Officer. And you recently wrote, the digitization of critical business functions has accelerated and continues to grow rapidly in the age of COVID-19. You mentioned organizations across industry sectors now realize they must develop new strategies to engage and retain clients, to expand the reach of marketing across new and emerging media channels, and to inspire and develop the right people to differentiate the brands and drive higher performance. Can you be more specific about how the pandemic has created more specific requirements for talent for corporations?
Sure. Well, RD, I would tell you that the pandemic certainly has accelerated my own research into this area. And it's nice to see Trailhead Talent Partners also put a stake in the ground on this particular topic. I believe COVID-19 has forced a lot of difficult decisions on organizations across industries. And it's really provided a new set of challenges for management leaders and in particular human resources leaders. But I think one of the key things we'll look back on in terms of this dark period in global history is that it really accelerated considerations about what we can do with technology and what we may not want to do with technology. From my perspective, these findings regarding the need for a chief virtualization officer, to me, they really sort of put a capstone on the thought of, or the concept of governance over the increasingly digital domain of business. I really see it as a role and a genre, if you will, of business management that really sort of dissects what are the limitations and the opportunities tied to virtualization. Should everything we do be virtualized, be digitized, or what needs to remain human focused, human driven? I think a lot of people out there would say algorithms and AI can start to lead us, But frankly, I think we need to be able to and be prepared to draw the line in terms of the functions we think are most critical to business, the ones that define us, and frankly, that connect us to our own people. And algorithms and AI can't do that. We need leadership in a human form, supported by smart decisions about digitization and virtualization of key functions.
No, I love that. Early in the pandemic, I was on a virtual event, actually about the monetization of virtual events, and 15,000 people from around the world came on. And that became the main ingredient for what became the Virtual Events Institute, which is teaching new skill sets to professionals that need to provide virtual events. And I think that was sort of the most obvious part of the pandemic, obviously, that we had to trade plane flights for Zoom meetings. But I think the thing that's under the surface that's so interesting is the way that that's now playing out in productivity and across corporations. I remember once I literally flew to Las Vegas for lunch, for a lunch meeting from New Hampshire, and I just think of how contrary that is to our carbon issue, our global warming issue, and to our family balance, and to just how that can absolutely be accomplished right now through virtualization. But it was always there, but this woke us up and forced us to do it. Are you seeing, as you interact in the corporation and with corporations and with talent management professionals, are you seeing specific sort of use of that? And where do you think it'll happen once we get back to being able to be face-to-face again?
Thanks, RD. And yeah, couldn't agree more in terms of impacts on the environment, corporate social responsibility, individual responsibility in terms of how we conduct ourselves on a daily basis and do business with one another. I think right now this topic is a bit ahead of where the marketplace is, where our economy is right now. But clearly, when we all wake up from this pandemic haze and begin to assess where our organizations and our businesses are, we're going to have to look back and make a lot of decisions about sort of the go forward state. What have we learned? I'd share the following. I believe what we need now in our organizations is an informed, multidisciplinary or multifunctional perspective on the limitations and the possibilities of doing more of our business virtually. What are the implications for processes, for systems? What are the implications for our people, for the human resources function, which is so critical? I believe we need someone to qualify, to investigate, to apply logic and judgment to questions like who should work remotely, or how can sales be executed in a more digital or digitized format? In what functions have we already found the limits of virtualization? Or where can we introduce more virtual resources, policies, and systems to grow business faster and more efficiently? I really think we need someone in each organization digging into these questions. And there's some reasons, which I'd be happy to explain, why I don't think that this can be conducted by someone in a role currently. That's why I think, my views align with those of the Trailhead Talent Partners findings about the emergence of a new role, the Chief Virtualization Officer.
Well, exactly. And I know that's the main motive behind Trailhead Talent Partners coming out with this job description. Call it a Chief Virtualization Officer. Call it somebody that focuses on this particular issue, which is incredibly important now and going to only increase in importance. Reporting directly to a senior leader, if not the CEO, I think is the point. So let's dig exactly into that job description a little bit. They in the job description, they suggest that this role will become a critical business partner to each functional leader in the executive suite, helping them take stock of new market forces and helping them navigate the complex business issues to increase sales and preserve profit margins. So can you share your thoughts on this? And as you mentioned before, why it can't be one of the existing positions that are in the company now, what the reason for that is.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I believe that, we need someone with that multidisciplinary experience and approach. It could be someone with a background in sales or marketing. It could be someone with a background in technology or general management or even human resources or compliance, to come in and really engage functional owners, sales, marketing, even HR, finance, in terms of what they stand to gain from this move to more digitization within their functions. And also, what are some of the risks to their own functions? What are some of the unanswered questions? But I think what's really critical is that the president or the CEO of the organization have an informed set of recommendations from someone who doesn't immediately stand to gain or be immediately hurt by the impacts on their own individual function. For example, take the chief sales officer, the chief revenue officer in the organization. A chief virtualization officer might find that and make the case, backed by data and analytics, that more investment in digital marketing might be good for the organization, might drive efficiencies in the organization. But when the CEO looks to say, well, how are we going to pay for increased investment in digital marketing? One of the potential answers may be to look hard at the sales force, to look hard at the sales function. Do we really need people driving around to 10 offices in a day selling? Or is there a more efficient way? In some organizations, there may be, in some, there may not be. And it gets back to the culture, the vision, the history, the legacy of the organization. What does it want to do personally? Where is that personal interaction a key differentiator for the organization? And where is it not? If you're really grounded in this human interaction, okay, we start to find and uncover some of the limitations of virtualization, of increased, for example, digital marketing. But if we feel that we're in a commodity business where price is a driver, this might well speak to that increased investment in digital marketing. And maybe therefore, we may not need the same sales resources we've always had, and the investment and the cost that comes with that. So, there might be great new opportunities, by the way, for the sales function. It's not just defense. It's not just about potential cutbacks. What investments might we make in the sales function that can be accelerated? What new markets can we penetrate? What other markets, adjacent markets, might we enter by making our sales team more efficient through digitization? So there's opportunities, there's limitations, but I would find it very difficult for a chief revenue or sales officer to go in and advocate for both sides of this equation to the CEO. That's why I believe you need the independence of someone who can come in, be an ally, help the sales leader sort some of these plus minuses, these pro cons, and deliver a set of recommendations that's well thought out, backed by research and data, and put the decision on the CEO directly. That's his or her job.
That makes perfect sense. And then I'm sure you get some efficiencies of scale because there's certain answers for one job function that can be carried over and maybe duplicated in another. Let's dig into some of the specific areas. I mean, an obvious one, and one you've been involved with for 30 years, is recruiting and the HR functions and talent management's function in bringing in talent. We've heard organizations such as Facebook, say that maybe half of its workforce may be remote in the future. And they're not talking about it as a cost-cutting move, although we've heard organizations, even large defense contractors here in the New England area, talk about the huge savings that will result in. But they're saying it from a talent perspective, that they now have access to talent that didn't exist before, that the earth is truly flat now, that we've been conditioned because of the pandemic to work virtually and make that work. And we found all these sort of advantages and disadvantages from it. How has the HR function in recruiting talent adapted to this? Has there been recruiting going on during the pandemic? I have to imagine there has. How is it happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Recruitment activity, talent management activity, has continued for sure. The pandemic has certainly had an impact on the risks involved for individual job seekers. A lot of people haven't wanted to even contemplate a career move during this time. But I'll tell you, as soon as we get a handle on the pandemic, I believe we're going to see a big increase in the number of people who are willing to explore new career opportunities, in part because they're going to be voting on how their organizations reacted to the pandemic. Were they enabled to work remotely? Or frankly, does that individual feel that he or she was put at risk by some of the company's policies that maybe were not as flexible as they might have been in other organizations? So there's going to be a lot of that reckoning from a career perspective in terms of how people feel their organization treated them during the pandemic. But there's an interesting, I think, paradox. We talk about the limitations and opportunities regarding virtualization. Certainly, I believe one big opportunity is around, making decisions about which roles can be done and should be done remotely versus need to be seen to be working. These kind of judgments, I think, is certainly one whole area for the chief virtualization officer to dig into, along with the head of HR. But then let's look on the flip side with regard to recruitment. I think many people out there would say, yes, for some roles, particularly where we're hiring at volume, technology and virtualization with job boards and LinkedIn can absolutely help us drive some efficiencies there. However, if we're recruiting at key management or executive levels, I would suggest that that's an area where we absolutely want to draw a line and say, this has to be driven by human judgment, human interaction, a human read on personality fit and fit with culture. I would not, in any organization, recommend those kinds of decisions, which are critical to the business, be handed over to an algorithm or a website or AI. Again, from my perspective, and I think the team at Trailhead has hit on this as well, I think it's about the separation of, what can be done efficiently with technology and virtualization and what has to remain intensely personal because it's leadership related or it's central to the mission and values of the organization.
Interesting. And I think we just talked about how this affects sort of the recruiting function within companies. It affects every job function, as we've discussed, and as Trailhead points out here. My wife is the financial director for a division of Habitat for Humanity, and she's doing her board. They're doing their board meetings and the finance meetings remotely, of course. It saves her a 50-minute drive, burns less carbon. And I asked her, "Do you think you'll go back after?" And she said, "We seem to be getting what we need to done here." I think that's happening everywhere across the country. And I think there's going to be some sort of balance to it, right? Where we will get together, we will still break bread, we will still have those interpersonal connections, because that's really, really important. But maybe we've discovered certain things can be done without getting in the car and going on the plane and all those things that can give the talent back some additional benefit because of the flexibility. And I agree with you. I think there's going to be this reckoning as we go back to the pandemic, especially has been voiced by the millennials, that they want that flexible. They want that freedom. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. It's also going to be interesting to see what becomes the office. We used to both go to the office and go to the industry events to meet with customers. And there's a lot of leaders that argue, the most important part is meeting with customers. And maybe both happen at the same time in the future. Maybe we go to events where the customers are, where we also get together with our fellow colleagues in our company.
Yeah, you hit a great point there. I mean, we tend to think of virtualization of process from our own perspective, but I think you hit on it exactly. Let's assume here that our customers are going to be changing and evolving as well. It's not just us changing with the times and with the future and what's efficient and good for our people and aligned with our mission and values, but our customers are going to be, considering these things as well. In fact, frankly, maybe it's time to begin to think what we could recommend in terms of our own learnings about this whole topic to our customers as a point of value add. Strengthen the relationship, strengthen that individual relationship by sharing what have we learned, what mistakes have we made, and what have we really hit on that's important. By the way, I think of just some of the efficiencies that can be gained here. I think one of the things that a chief virtualization officer can really dig into independently, as if you will, an advisor to the functions and particularly to the CEO, is, do we really need all these meetings? There are so many organizations that are paralyzed by meeting culture, 1-hour meetings, day-long meetings, half-day meetings. Do we really need all these meetings? What kind of efficiencies can we gain? How can that be done remotely? What kind of collaboration tools can we build into our routines to create the efficiency that you just described? One other thing I'd share with you, RD, is I think one question naturally that could come forward is, can't this role or this function of virtualization and sort of the investigation and everything that needs to happen behind it, can it be done by the people who are already in roles, such as the chief revenue sales officer, chief finance officer, chief marketing officer? I would suggest to you that these individuals have so much on their plate already. They've already been forced to navigate and adjust sales based on COVID and keeping their businesses alive. Trailhead Talent Partners has put forward a job description. And when you read and digest that job description, it quickly becomes apparent, in line with some of my own research, that, yeah, this is a big job, actually. This is a lot of work. You can't simply, in good faith, take that and layer it onto the existing job function of one of these executive leaders. That's why you need an independent voice to tackle this long list of things that need to be done and considered and explored and recommended to the CEO. This needs to be done independently. There's a heck of a lot of work there. And frankly, this individual needs to engage each of those functions as key voice of customer, so that really good, strong recommendations can be made to the CEO. The CEO also is so buried, he or she can't do this themselves. That's why they need a specialist on this case to look across functions and make the recommendations this organization needs to figure out its digital future.
Yeah, so spot on. And it's about not piling it on to the job functions that already exist, but giving them a partner, somebody that can reach across the aisles in the various disciplines in the company and be a partner for them. And whatever this position ends up costing and what the salary of this position ends up being, is yet to be seen. But I would think the value, the return on investment and the value creation of the position can be so quickly realized in efficiency, but also in value creation and creating more channels for their customers and sales and all these things.
Yeah, I mean, just think of the one acute issue, for example, all the people who are used to office work, who have been told that you're going to be working remotely, and they've had to adjust their own sales and figure out how to be efficient, from a remote office, a home office, perhaps. At some point, those individuals may be told, you're going to have to come back to the office. And that's going to be a critical point in the experience, the life cycle of that employee with that organization. Because if the organization doesn't handle it well, there's going to be backlash. And what that backlash translates into is higher turnover. More employees are going to say, well, wait a minute, my organization, in my opinion, is not being progressive on this issue. Therefore, I'm going to stamp my vote and decide to explore other opportunities. And I think there's going to be this competition among organizations of all sizes and across all industries in terms of which organizations are looking at the future, progressive, and have the leaders to be progressive in the vision, and they're willing to make hard decisions and challenge the status quo, versus those that are simply going to want to try to get back to the way we used to do things. And, key talent is going to put a vote on this, and they're going to walk out the door if they don't like what they see. So yeah, again,
to that point, it is quite amazing, because I've read a lot of stats, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of this in the market, that the voluntary quit rate through the pandemic has actually been substantially high. I mean, certainly we've had disruption in the unemployment rate, but for skilled work and for top talent, I don't think the war for talent has slowed down at all during the pandemic. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
Well, I would say this. I mean, I would, particularly at the executive level where I've been focusing most of my career, I would say that you can look at the numbers and statistics, but I think every business leader out there could name 5 to 7 people in their own organizations who are absolutely critical. And if they leave, there's going to be big disruption, big questions raised, and the teams that used to report to these individuals who have now left, there's going to be major disruption. Some of those people might decide to leave. So it's a ripple effect. You really have to engage your best and brightest now. You need to begin to paint a portrait of what the organization is going to look like post-pandemic, and really make investments in the right people. I mean, some people might leave because they weren't a right fit for the organization, for the culture, but there's others that are the cornerstones of who your organization says it is.
Yeah.
And this whole issue of virtualization is going to show them whether your organization truly is what it tells them it is.
Yeah. I think what this discussion brings to light is how all these things are interconnected. Through the summer, we saw the incredible intensity on diversity.
Absolutely.
And now the reaction to, as we look to safely return to work, what that's going to look like, and work-family balances, and the sort of environmentalism movement as well, and how the employees, the talented employees, the ones really in demand, get to vote with whether they work there or not, based off of whether they feel comfortable with the mission of that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during this time here, absolutely, we have to acknowledge, the reckoning on race relations in this country, and the systemic racism that we've all seen and been brought to so many eyes. Again, I think diversity and of leadership is another key thing that people are going to be looking at. As we emerge from the pandemic, it's not only about sort of whether my job is remote or not remote. It's a question of who's leading our organizations. What values do they bring to that role? Are women and others being brought to the table who, frankly, haven't been represented? I think it's time that leaders look at the makeup of their leadership teams, and if there was ever a call to get more African Americans, more women, others from underrepresented groups into leadership roles, now is the time. It's really stark at this point. If your organization, again, just wants to get back to the way it was doing business pre-pandemic, again, that's going to send a clear message to your people, and they will vote on that accordingly in terms of where they take their careers moving forward.
And when you think about this new role of the Chief Virtualization Officer, again, whatever the company decides to call it, because this is new, you kind of think back to the industrial age and industrial engineers. They were trying to make processes more efficient. But it's a little bit of that. And you also think about sort of the sales, the growth leader, trying to engage a larger community of customers. And you think about the head of marketing, and you think about the head of HR and all their roles. And this person kind of needs to be familiar with the various disciplines within an organization, and have a real partnership approach with them, so that everybody can work together for the common good.
Absolutely. I think one of the key measures of who might fit into this Chief Virtualization Officer role would be someone who is really good at listening, someone who can go in and take stock of the state of various functions in the organization, the emergence of technology, the efficiencies, and then step back and apply logic and judgment into some sound, sometimes bold recommendations for the CEO. And the decisions made by the CEO ultimately are either going to suggest to people in the organization and their customers that we're a progressive, flexible, efficiency-minded organization that can grow in some new and different ways, or again, whether we're just simply looking to default back to the state of play before the pandemic. Because, let's face it, a lot of our organizations were really not equipped from a leadership perspective to multiply opportunities, to give new opportunities to people in our organizations, and to tackle new markets, new business opportunities. Now, what we're saying here is let's take stock of digitization and virtualization opportunities. Let's draw the line in terms of the functions that have to be human, that have to be personal, that have to be done face by face and influenced by human judgment. And let's go forward with more diverse thinking, more of an open mind. I mean, frankly, that's, I think, one of the key messages for me during this conversation is we need more open-mindedness in organizations to what the possibilities can be. And it's exciting. It's exciting, frankly, from a workforce perspective, from a technology, from a business strategy perspective. If we look at opportunities with an open mind, we're likely to find more of them.
No, it's very exciting. And I had full intention of digging into this job description and the details of it, which we can do, individually with folks and everything. And we'll give the download instructions on how to get this job description. But there's one area that I wanted to hit on that we haven't yet, which is the various industries and the various marketplaces. Prior to this interview, Joe, you and I spoke with one of the individuals at Trailhead about the pharmaceutical industry and the changes that could become from that in the sales function alone. How different that could be, where even after the pandemic, their access to the doctor's office may be quite different. You want to just hit on that a little bit on how pharma and maybe other industries kind of do need to really understand how their industry's been impacted?
I know Trailhead's done some work on this, but yeah, pharmaceutical sales in particular is an absolute focus area. In terms of do we need the same sales force saying the same thing, interacting with customers the same way? And let's remember, a big piece of what's driving that conversation are the changes that customers are making within their own organizations in terms of how does a doctor apply his or her time, and what does that customer look like now versus what they look like pre-pandemic. So it's not just about us in terms of adapting to this. It's how are our customers adapting, and therefore what efficiencies can we realize? And frankly, if you free up more of a pharma sales rep's time because they don't have to spend so much time in the car, what more or what different can they do to uncover new opportunities? So, again, there's real opportunity here, but it's about evolution. It's about adaptation. It's about partnering with the chief sales officer to figure this out. And they need an ally and an advocate in the chief virtualization officer to help impress upon the CEO what those possibilities can be from a business perspective. But absolutely, that's a key early, I think, focus area. Pharmaceutical sales, where's it going? What's it going to look like? What does it require of the individual sales rep?
Yeah, it's a great example. But even when you hit on doctors, I've been reading about the growth in telemedicine during the pandemic, and I don't think we're going back. I mean, the growth has been astonishing. And so that doctor's role has changed, and their time frame has changed, and their billing practices have changed. But let's think also about like the accounting firm and the auditors. What auditor is going to, why are they going to go on site anymore when they don't need to? Why would they, create the carbon footprint? Why would they waste the money for the client on the client's dime, by the way? Why wouldn't the modern auditing firms of the future have a very virtualized process? Of course, there's going to be some meetings and face-to-face trust building. But I mean, I almost can't think of an industry it doesn't affect. Now, I get the fact that when you're manufacturing products on the floor, or maybe you're in the food processing business, that there are certainly job functions that you have to have hands-on product, hands-on assembly. But so many of the roles around it can be virtualized. I often joke when I'm talking with reporters about writing the Pope, about suggesting we do virtualized confession, because a lot more people will try it, and then he'll have a lot more people to convert, which is kind of the point, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's put it into some perspective. We're talking about digitization and virtualization of business, but all of us are living in a world. If you think about what many of our children have gone through with COVID, they've been turned into remote learners in many cases. They know kids as young as 6, 7 years old know how to operate a Zoom meeting or some other kind of visual, video interaction. So they're going to be stepping into the workforce eventually. This is going to be ingrained in them. This is going to be nothing new. It's not going to be intimidating to them. They will have done it. They will have been there. They will have learned, online. But I think the point I want to make here is that all of our lives now are becoming increasingly digital, increasingly virtual. So why would not our business lives, our careers, our job functions also evolve and adapt with that? So, this is frankly, I think, an easy decision for organizations. We need someone showing us, demonstrating to us the impacts and the possibilities of virtualization, digitization across all functions and management teams, so we can figure out what works and what doesn't, and where to draw the line between digital and highly personal.
Absolutely. You reminded me of one more example. My daughter is a school teacher of fourth grade up in Maine, and I was talking to her, and I wonder if they'll ever have snow days again in Maine. Like, why would they, right? Because this generation now has gone through this and they can do it virtually. And if they can be set up and prepared, and I think of the analogy for that for corporations, this could be to the level of when technology started within companies in the first place, when IT started, when maybe IBM mainframes were coming through. You needed somebody to concentrate on that and understand how that technology could impact the organization. Or maybe when the web came around and we realized how that could impact the organization. I think it's to that extreme. I think these changes that have happened, and I think that's the point of this job description, is that somebody needs to concentrate on this and be a partner to all facets of business, reporting to the CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. It impacts all of us. It impacts every person in the organization. Why then would you not put someone smart, energetic, open-minded, and a great listener, at the helm to help the organization figure this stuff out?
Exactly. Well, I love this because this is such the American mindset and the sort of making lemonade out of lemons here. We're very resilient, and I think we've proven it through the pandemic. And I see work talking with my connections and colleagues, and in the interviews I'm in on a weekly basis, of just the reaction to the pandemic, but the positive things that have come from it. I think this is one of them. And I think we should keep the focus on this. I really appreciate all your insight today, Joe, and helping to apply your experience in 30 years of talent management with we've just gone through and what the future is about to bring, particularly around this new role of the Chief Virtualization Officer. And thank you for your time, Joe.
Yeah, thanks. And let's hope 2021 is a year of opportunities and possibilities.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks for the time. Thank you.